Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm joined by PaintShop Professional Carole Asselin, who will be demonstrating a variety of techniques to create and achieve interesting special effects in PaintShop Pro. Carole is a PaintShop Pro power user, and she's been using PaintShop Pro ever since version 7. You might be familiar with her from previous PaintShop Pro webinars, as she's been featured in, or as a scrapbooking specialist. She's been teaching people how to create digital layouts and designs using PaintShop Pro for several years. Carole has also coded hundreds of scripts to help designers, photographers, and digital scrapbookers work faster in PaintShop Pro. Before I hand it over to Carole, I want to mention this webinar will be recorded, and a link to watch the recording will be included in a follow-up email you will receive tomorrow. Additionally, as a special thank you for your attendance today, I would like to offer you a 35% off the purchase or upgrade of PaintShop Pro 2019 for a limited time only. You will receive this coupon code to redeem this amazing discount in the follow-up email tomorrow as well, so keep an eye out for that email. As a final thank you, Carole has generously offered to waive the fee for all attendees of this webinar who would like to attend a class she is hosting on photographics in PaintShop Pro, which she can provide a few more details on for you. The coupon code to attend this class for free will also be included in your follow-up email you'll receive tomorrow, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. So that takes care of all the housekeeping items from me. So now I will pass it over to Carole.
Hello, everybody. As a PaintShop Pro user, you can do a lot of things with your photos, and even if you have very good photos, you can always apply different effects to make them even more unique, as if you could be more unique. One very impressive effect is the colored focus. And typically, we would turn your photo in black and white and just keep a certain detail in colors. So whether it's a single flower out of a bouquet or a person out of a background, there are different techniques to do that, and some of them are just a little longer to use, while some are a little faster, and I do like to use the faster ones. So we have this photo here, and this is already a copy of the image, because whenever you want to work on a photo, you want to use a copy. Never use your original, because at any point, if it is overwritten, you will lose it. So you don't want that. So this is already a copy. And what I will want to do is turn all my photo or all the background in black and white, but keep that little girl in color. So that will really make her stand out. Already the photographer took a really good picture, because it has really depth of field, so the background is blurred. So there is already some focus on that little girl, but adding the color over a black and white will be even better. In order to do that, I will start by going in my layers palette and right click, and I will duplicate my layer. So I will have two layers. One layer will be left as is, while the top one I will turn to black and white. I will do that under Adjust, Hue and Saturation, Colorize, and I will simply reduce the saturation to 0. Whatever color is the hue, the saturation being down to 0, you will have a black and white photo. There are other ways to turn to black and white, but this one is sufficient for the effect you want. Now we could go around the shape and make a selection using the lasso tool, but that is really tedious. I like to go a little faster, so I'm going to use simply the eraser tool, set to a size that will be suitable for the size of the image. My image here is 2000 pixels wide. If yours is larger, or if your subject is larger, you might want to also adjust the size of your brush. I like the hardness not to be at 100 because it will give very sharp pixels. Sometimes I go to 97. It just gives a very subtle edge. The opacity is at 100, and the rest I just keep at default. So now I simply have to delete or erase where I want the color to show through. So that is very simple technique. You go around like this. Of course, depending on the details you have, you will want to be more careful, more precise. I'm going to go around here. So I will erase. I'm going to now reduce the size of my brush to go and get closer for more detail. So I'm going to zoom in. And go a little closer. You can see now that green coat. Get a bit more of the hair. And the face, I'm probably going to go even smaller, but I'm going to go this part. Might as well do that little bubble. It's so colorful. And let's go down even more in size. We don't want a little black and gray nose, so we want to have colors here. Yeah, the bow. I get all the bow. The fingers. I think I might be getting a bit too much on the outside. Now, depending on the size and the shape that you have, you might, let's say that you go a little over, that means that you erase that black and white area. But that's not all lost. You don't have to go back. You can, of course, go with Control Z or the undo, but you can also use your right mouse button, which will unerase. You see that? So if you go too far in one area, you can always correct that area. So I'm going to keep erasing here. And that little girl looks pretty good. So now let's see what I did miss. So if I hide the bottom layer, I'll see that I have some misses here. So I can just remove them, especially since they were not supposed to be missed. Sometimes you might have an area that has a hole, like maybe under your, like under the arms or between the legs, or, and I can see here there's some white that was probably from that coat. And gives me an idea of where I might have missed. I might have missed here. Let's see the coat here. That's probably the sleeve. Oh, and definitely here. That area here again. And let's see how it works. See here, I went a little too far, so I will unerase that detail. And I get a little bit of hair here. Not too much. Sometimes it's a little hard. Might want to go very faint for areas because the hair, it's kind of hard to select the hair with this technique without catching a lot of the background with it. So let's do close to the little fingers. and a little bit too much. I undelete, and there it is. So you can see how now this little girl really stands out from a fairly ordinary photo. Nice photo from before, that was nice, but this gives it a little more focus. So this is the easy way using the eraser tool. It's very, very fun, and you can do that with just about any colored photo. You keep one element, one flower, one object, one person, one ribbon, one bubble. We could have just kept only the bubbles too, or we could even add the bubbles, the other bubbles from this. For example, actually, I think that would be a good idea. I will add a little color here, see? And of course, you can be a little bit more precise, but this is one fun element that you can use to create a unique effect. So that's our first effect. Now let's see how we can start with a photo that does not really have depth of field. Like in that previous photo, we did have a background that was blurred, but this one we don't. So how can we add blur? Well, typically we might want to select the subject and then add a blur later, but we will see that it can have a few inconvenience. So we will start by selecting this this person, but again, instead of using the selection tool, which can be quite long and tedious, there is another way that is faster. And the technique is with the edit selection. So again, this is already a copy of my photo, and I will click on the icon edit selection. I could go under selection, edit selection, or just use the shortcut or the icon that is on the layers palette. And you can see it shows a black layer that is to create the selection. And I'm going to pick a white as a foreground, and I'm going to brush on that black layer in white. So I'm going to use my paintbrush. And again, the size of the brush will depend on the size of your image and the size of your subject. So by brushing in white, you can see how it shows in red. That's ruby red. It's simply a masking technique. Wherever you paint in white, it will be this color. If you were to use gray, it would be more pink or fainter. And so I will select that the person everywhere. I'm going to tweak later with the smaller brush. And just like I did earlier with the erase versus unerase, in this case, if I was to go too far, I can use my right button, which will be painting in the background, which is black. And in the black, it will basically remove that selection. So I'm going to select this. And this is a little bit tight. I'm going to reduce my brush. Nice little photo. Let's zoom in. Now, being closer, I have a better view of what I need to add. And you can see how it's a little pixelated because I did not change my hardness. I should have changed it here. And here, because it's a little pointy, and I can just go a little over and undo. You see, sometimes it could be a way to work. Not always the best, but sometimes it works. So let's go to the fingers. That little bird is a little bit small. I'm going to go with 10 because, of course, I want to have that little bird. It's kind of nice when you're able to go and feed the birds like that. And this is not a collage, this is an actual photo. Some places you can go and birds are not afraid of feeding on your hands. Okay, this is a little bit too much. I'm going to tweak here. Add the watch. Can you see here I went over, so I'm using my right button to paint in black. And here is an area that we'll see there's a hole, but I really do want it unselected. Okay. Of course, you can get more precise, more detailed, but we don't want to spend hours, at least not for this presentation. And I think that's about it. Oh, maybe a bit more on the hair. Okay. So now that we have covered our subject in that ruby red, we click on that icon again, and like magic, it is all selected. So that way you can get a selection that is much smoother than if you were to use the lasso. And personally, I find that it is a bit faster too. So now what I'm going to do is in the layers palette, I'm going to right click and promote this selection to a layer. So now I'll have the subject on her own on a separate layer, and I have my background. Okay, so I'll deselect with Control D. So since she is separate, maybe I can now go onto my background and add a Gaussian blur to add some depth of field. And let's see what it will do. So I can go under Adjust Blur, Gaussian Blur. I can add 5, 6. It just depends on the effect you want to get. That is not bad, but if you look closely, you'll have kind of a ghost color, kind of a cast, which is actually from the subject being blurred outward. So what we can do instead, we cancel this. We will reselect our subject. And that, since it is already cut out, I can just go and float. So I can go with select all with Control A, I can float, Control F. I like to use shortcuts because they go faster. And then defloat with Control Shift F. Okay, I could have the same thing here. I could have done select all, then float, and then defloat. So basically what it does is it will select my subject. I'll go on the background layer, and now I will have to promote this background layer so it's becoming a raster. Otherwise, I would not be able to cut out. And using the delete key on my keyboard, I can just hit the delete key, and you can see how now she is gone. So if I hide the top layer, this is what I have for my background. So Control D. So by not having her in the picture, I will not get the color of the shirt and the arms and the pants and everything in the blur. So let's see what it will do. I will go again, adjust, blur, Gaussian blur. But well, that's not any better because now you do have a different cast, which is more like the blur of the empty space. We don't want that either. Well, unless if you actually want it, that's fine. But there's a way to get rid of it. So what I'm going to do here is simply hide the top layer. And on my background, I will go and get my warp brush. So that warp brush, I have different modes. I'll use the push for now, and I'll just push in the edges. Just push them inward. It's going to be blurred, so it doesn't matter if it's slightly distorted. You just don't want to have a very close edge. So all inward. Now I have this little bird here just to make sure that it is hidden. I can go and contract. So look at this, it's going to contract that hole. On the other hand, this area, I want to expand it to make sure, because if I use the push, because it's pretty small, it's not going to work. So I'm going to use here the expand mode, and you look at how it's going to go. And I will have to apply it. So now if I look at my top image, of course, I can see some distortion, but it's okay. It's going to be blurred. If I am to reduce the opacity, I can see how the edges are not going to become blurred with an empty space. So I can go back to my background, adjust, blur, Gaussian blur. Let's go with 7. And you can see now that the edges are really clean. There's no ghost color or cast appearing. And this is how you can turn a photo without a depth of field into one that has some. Very easy to make, even though it's not really quick. I guess I should have done the legs. I didn't go down too far, but you get the idea. So this is one great and fun way to add some depth of field when you don't have any. Okay, another way that you can use a photo is to turn maybe a photo that is not the greatest, maybe because of the colors, maybe because the background, maybe you want to use only a silhouette. And to make a silhouette, it is very easy. And you can use different tools. And the first tool you might want to try to use is the Smart Selection brush. As long as your subject is fairly easy to identify or cut out from the background, as long as it's fairly contrasting from the background, you can start with the selection brush. However, it usually needs some tweaking. So I'm just going to use my selection brush over the person. I'm going to add those gloves here. Got the legs. I want to get the foot, and I'd like to get the ball. Oh, it's not the best because sometimes that selection brush might miss some parts, or it might include some parts that you don't want to. But it's kind of a good start. So I'm going to go to my layers palette, right click, and I can promote that selection to a layer. Let's see what it does. Well, not so bad, but let's undo that. So instead of promoting that selection, I'm going to add a new raster layer. So now I have an empty layer, and I can use my flood fill tool. I'll switch to the black and fill with black. Now you can see areas that are missed, or so let's deselect with Control D, and you can see how it's not perfect. I'm going to reduce the opacity just so I can see a bit better, and I will activate my paintbrush. And by zooming in, I can see, for example, this should have been in black. So I'm gonna get a little bit bigger. Now it's not going to show black because I reduced the opacity, because if I increase the opacity completely, I might not see some of the details I want to correct. So I'm going to include the hair more. But since it is a silhouette that I'm creating, it does not have to be perfectly following every little details or little folds here, because sometimes in the silhouette, those might not make much sense. So it means that I can kind of round up a bit, I can adjust and either add some details that will make sense with the silhouette or remove some. So for example, here I'm gonna cover that badge here. And I'm gonna go with the foot here, at least the shoe, and might as well add the heel to that shoe and the toes. And you can see here there's a little bit of, well, something that needs to be smoothened, and I'll be able to do that with my eraser tool. I'm going to select that ball, and I want it round so it looks like a ball. And even if some areas are not really round, I know it's a ball, so I want to have it round. Being a silhouette afterward, you won't know whether I was following it exactly. So using my eraser tool, I'm going to remove some of the black here. And around the ball, there was that section here that was selected. I don't need that. That's not part of the ball. And especially if I remove the background, you would be wondering, what is that little hat doing on the ball? And the same thing here. You can see how there's kind of a, we can just see the shorts and it is okay in the photo. But if I increase now the opacity and remove the background, You might say, well, maybe I'll remove this part. Or look at the hand here. That doesn't look normal. So I can tweak, oops, not with the eraser, but go back to the brush, and I could just round that to look like the gloves. And with my eraser, I could just remove some to try to kind of shape a bit your silhouette. Remember that you are the artist, so you might want to get some details in or out. And looking at the silhouette, sometimes you might have really some shapes that are really weird. So let's kind of get the, maybe if I want a thumb a little shorter, or this one finger here looks weird, I can just adjust this, remove some of the folds from the uniform or the head. Because sometimes you will have the profile, you see the nose and the mouth, sometimes you don't. It's really up to you. And now you do have a silhouette. Let's double check, because at the bottom we still have a few tweaks. See some, whoop, that's the eraser. I'm going to erase this part here. And I'm going to add, looks like the leg here is really missing a bit. And sometimes if you are creating a silhouette from an image like this one, part of the elements could be like inside the grass or behind a branch. So you really have to simply play around to make it as if there's no distraction around from your image. And now you do have a fun silhouette. You can save it now as a PNG and use it on a different background, or you can have it to create a pattern, whatever you want. And of course, you can change the silhouette color for something else if your project requires a different color. So in that case, you don't want to paint over. You would use here the lock transparency. So once it's locked, it means that everything that you will paint will only paint the non-transparent pixels. So very simply put, if you want it in red, you take your flood fill tool, you click on your shape, and everything is painted. And also it is painted correctly, so that if you do have any faint pixels, like if you had some feathering, this technique will keep the feathering instead of having a very sharp edge. Once you're done, make sure that you unlock it, because the next commands might give you really odd results. So that's what you can do with some photos. It's great if you have photos that you want to put, in front of a bright background, like a sunset or something like that. It is a great way to also use a photo that has bad colors, because then you can shape your silhouette the way you want. Okay, let's see another fun technique. And we are going to be using this photo and adding a text overlay. So first of all, I'm going to create my text overlay to be something seamless. So I will start with opening something that will be, let's say, 600 pixels by 100 pixels. And I'm going to be using just black. And with the text tool, I'm going to write some words. So I'm going to write, for example, let's say sister. Okay, this is way too big. It's going to something like that. Okay, I can adjust later. And I'm going to add mother, but I'm going to change the font just to make it fun. Accept. So sister, mother, daughter. Let's put, and we'll change font again. I accept. Okay, so I'll just make sure that they all fit within my my image. Get close enough. I guess that sister was on a different layer, no problem. Okay, so how about now I will right click and I'll convert this to a raster. This one too. They should have been together, but, and I will, well, I could merge them, yeah, because they should have been, so merge down. And I will right click and duplicate and move them somewhere else. So at this point, what I will want to do is make a selection. So I will select the sister, go to my layers palette, right click, promote that selection to a layer. So I want to have sister on its own layer. I'll go back to the layer where it has all three words and hit the delete key. So now I have sister on its own, mother, daughter on their own. So that allows me now to move them around. And I'll try just to make sure they are even. And now let's make a selection that will cover that. Pretty close. And I can now go to image, crop to selection, and this will become my text overlay. So on my image, first of all, I will try to increase the brightness. So I go to adjust, brightness contrast, and I will increase the contrast so that the outside of the person is mostly white, and we do have some lighter and some more definition of the person as opposed to the background. Now I will add a new raster layer, and I want to add this text overlay on top in that blank raster layer. So I will go to my materials palette under pattern, and I'll go look for image 14. That was the text. The angle should be 0. Let's see, the scale is going to be 75. I made it pretty big. And let's now use the flood fill tool and flood fill my image. So you can see how the text is overlay. How do I get this text to look a bit better? I will go here in the blend mode and I will go to burn. And everything that is white and very, very light will not show, but the colors will somehow show up where there is some color. So this is one fun way to do that. If you want, you can also go back to your materials palette and change the angle, let's say 45. Going back here, you can add another raster layer and flood fill with an angle. Again, you can go to Burn. You can have the text differently placed. You can play around with the different blend modes, but some of them will not give very good results, while some will. It depends on the colors of your photo to start with. So see, overlay is not really too bad in the dark areas, but in the light areas, you don't see much. If you were to go to multiply, well, it shows everywhere, so it doesn't give much definition. Hard light, maybe not. Soft light, yeah, somewhat it could work. So this is one way you can do it to add some fun text. Now let's try that with a different photo. And a different approach. So again, this is supposed to be a copy already because never work on your original. I will go to Effects, Artistic Effects, Posterize. And I want the level here, the higher you go, the more your photo will look like it should. But the lower you go, you'll see fewer colors. And if you go with either a 2 or 3, you can have something interesting. I think by the time you reach 4, it might not be as good. But let's go with 3. So what I'll do now is I will use my magic wand, and the match mode, I want RGB because I want to match the colors. I want the contiguous to be unchecked because I want all the colors, whether they are touching or not. Anti-alias, always have that. And I will select the darkest area. So I'm going to use the black. Now adding a new raster layer. I will use my text overlay. I'll go back to the horizontal though. And I will go back to my photo and flood fill that area. It doesn't show because I have my photo. You can see how it shows here. If I find that it is a little bit too large, I can change my mind and I can delete, adjust, and maybe I'll go with 50%. There. Okay, I will deselect. Let's go back to my photo and find now with the magic wand, I'll activate that background image again. I'll go with a different color that is dark. So let's say the second darkest will be that reddish. I'll add a new raster layer. And I will flood fill with that same word, but let's change again the scale. Let's go now to 30%. So what does it look like? Yeah, could be okay. I can change the angle. Not very much details because of the hat, I think. Probably would have worked better with this one. Let's actually try this one instead. So I will close this, close this. I'll keep my text overlay, don't want to do that again. And reopen this photo. And this time I will use again effects, artistic effects, posterize. I use the same settings, and as you can see, it's going to be probably better. Let's try with 2. 2 might be a little too few. I'll go with 3. So I'll repeat the process, select the darkest color, add a new raster layer, go with my pattern. Let's go to 60%. I think this image is a little larger, so I can probably get away with larger scale. And I flood fill. Yeah. Now with my magic wand, back to that background, let's make a selection on that pinkish, which will make more details of the face. Add a new raster layer. And then I'll change my scale now to 50. My flood fill, and I flood fill with that. And I deselect. And you can see how it can look interesting. Sometimes two colors would be enough. You might want to go further. And if you want now, you can also use exactly like we did earlier with the locked transparency. So I can go and pick the color. So the brown or the dark for the hair, I'll leave it as is, but maybe I want to pick that pinkish, make it a solid color, lock the transparency. And since it's really small, it's really hard to select. Once I have my flood fill tool, I can select all under select all. And now if I click, it might not show because it's the same color, but you look at this, the text now is in that color. See? So you can unlock and you can have your image. Of course, it's not going to be an effect that will give great details about how the face is or the makeup or the smile, but you can certainly use a photo to ordinary photo and add that kind of an effect. Okay, and now let's close this one. Another effect that can be very commonly used is the vignette effect. And there are different ways to create it, but in recent versions of PaintShop, there is a function that really makes it very easy, which is under Effects, Photo Effects, Vignette. Not very hard to remember. And this is how you can select. You can use a circular selection. You could use a freehand selection. So if I want to select around the hand, for example, like this is how it will create the vignette. It could be a rectangle, or it could be here if I already had a selection before I click on this function. And this will allow you to increase the darkness or brightness on the outside. So you choose. It's always going to be black in this function. You have the blur. So the less blur on the outside versus more blur where you add the focus really on the center and the rest is really blurred. You can have the glow, which will brighten the center. Sometimes it will give kind of a magical effect, but sometimes you don't want it. And then the feathered edges. So you can see how it goes from darker to lighter. Well, you can have more feathers or less, and then you can see how the edges are getting closer to be um, straight or something like that. So this is one way to create the vignette effect. But there is another way also. You can go under Effects, Photo Effects, Graduated Filter. And this will give you the option to create a vignette effect with colors. So by default here, it will be black. So if I right click, I'll have those swatches. I can get black and I get the effect that is similar to what I had before. But if I want to have a different color, I want to have a purple. You can see how I get the vignette with purple. Or if I want to have another color, maybe I want to have an aqua to go with the image. Maybe I want it darker, not black, but I want darker aqua, and this is the effect. So you can compare what you get on the left and on the right for this, and you have the same kind of the blend. You have the blend in color, but you can see how it's kind of adjusting. It's a little bit similar to that feathering, but more as far as the size. And you have the opacity of how dark you want to have that vignette. Very different results that you can get. And in this case, we have the going from the color to no color, so from transparent, but we could have it going to white. In this case, well, you don't want that because you probably want to see your central subject. So we have a nice vignette effect. So we had a look at what 5 different ways you can treat your photos to add some special effects that you can use in various projects. And with Christmas coming, you might want to create some Christmas cards with your favorite photos and give them some interesting treatment. So I hope that that will inspire you to give a try and apply some effects to your own photos, whether they are the great photos you want to get even better, or some so-and-so photos that you want to make into some kind of masterpiece. So,
Hi, Carol. Thank you. I actually just have one quick question for you, if you don't mind answering it quickly
sure.
here. We've had a few questions. Are you using a pen and tablet or your
Yes.
mouse?
Yes, I am using a pen and tablet.
And what kind would that be?
I'm using a very old bamboo fun from Wacom. I don't think it's available anymore, but it's a medium size.
Okay, perfect. Yes, had several people asking questions about that.
I find
Okay.
it is much easier to work precisely than with a mouse.
hmm Okay, Carol, I'll do my little exit here if you're all finished up.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you to everyone so much for attending our webinar today, and thank you, Carol, for being an excellent presenter. A reminder to everyone to watch for the follow-up email that will come out tomorrow, and that will include a lot of great items, including a recording to this webinar, a discount code to purchase or upgrade PaintShop Pro 2019 at 35% off, and a coupon code to attend Carol's photographics class for PaintShop Pro for free. So thanks so much, everybody, again, and we will see you next time.